bluefin down off along South Shore, Long Island, New Jersey. So kind of do a little bit of everything. Tuna is my primary fish that we're chasing, and squid early in the season. We'll do some striped bass stuff here and there, but mostly tuna, focusing on tuna. And mahi and wahoo and whatever else we can find. Anyway, there's my contact information. The boat I run, it's a 32-foot pursuit. All updated electronics, which I'll get into in a little bit. Very important offshore. Some of the boats we run in down Long Island, center console specifically, both boats jig and pop primarily. These boats are only really jig and pop. We don't troll much. I will talk about how we troll a little bit and how we use it to our advantage as far as jig and pop fishing is concerned. But anyway, we're going to be talking about today jig and pop fishing, the hows and when, the rods and reels we're using, and some of the lures and the differences. And also I'll refer to you a lot about social media and what you're seeing out there and how it's going to affect you on the water and with the gear that you're buying. So jig and pop fishing, the art of jig and pop. So 15 years ago, even 20 years ago now, when we started to go fishing for tuna with spinning gear, we use advanced stalls, kind of anything that's going to hold up to any of these fish and not break. A lot of fiberglass rods, anything that we could try and, like I said, really get our hands on. Not a lot of very specific jig and pop tackle designed out there. Technology, especially in the last 5 to 8 years, has exploded in the jig and pop world. Hence, you're seeing our jig and pop bites around here, Rhode Island, Cape Cod, even down in New Jersey. It became popular at Cape Cod. A lot of very prominent captains you would know about, also down in New Jersey. And it was weird because I started doing it down. I did it in the Cape. We did it in Long Island. I did it with John at One More Cast. And then it kind of merged here in Rhode Island. It's pretty cool how it all happened. So we were kind of sneaky about it. We'd go out and kind of do our thing and be quiet and come back in and everything you're trolling or whatever. It was quiet. It's proven to be very effective even on giant tuna. There's now gear that's specifically designed to catch giant tuna. You can put a lot of drag on some of those fish with the proper gear to do it. We always tie new knots. I think failure in jig and pop fishing a lot of times is your knots. It's bad knots, bad hardware. One thing that I'm very, very particular about when we're starting to rig our gear is knowing what is on our line. But we're always tying new leaders every day, watching them as we fish throughout the day. Again, breakdown from casting is one of our big problems we see. I say keep it simple. In many cases, less is more. So, those that are new to offshore fishing understand usually how to chase false albacore and bonito. And you're going as light a tackle as you possibly can with the smallest leader that you can, with the smallest hooks, trying to make everything as tiny as hidden as you can. These are giant false albacore. So less is more. A lot of the times you need to be kind of running that edge of having something that may break or may not break. And some days you can throw a beer can and a hot dog in there and they'll eat it. So you just need to be prepared that sometimes less is more. So you're going to see things that people tell you to do, and it may not work. And I'll explain some of those things today, how we typically rig, and then what we can do to get to that level, things that'll work to try and trick some of these fish. There's many ways to set things up, many ways to do things. I've worked with, I've chartered, I've made it for, and I've been on other boats with a lot of very experienced captains. When I sit on those boats now, as somebody that owns a business, I kind of keep to myself and let them run things the way they do. Everybody has a way to do things. It's because it works for them. We don't have a lot of failures, and so what I'm going to tell you today is what we do. I'm not going to tell you up here and spew some nonsense that you're going to like and have a great video on social media. It's not what I'm about. I will tell you what we do and why we do it. And if, like I said, you want me to show you something after the fact, I'll hang out here. I know it's going to close up at about 7 o'clock, but I have no problem hanging out and talking to somebody about something to do if you have questions. So what we're targeting, yellow fins, Bluefins, yellowfins, bluefins. That's my daughter. My kids love to come with me. Love seeing kids come on the water. Bluefin tuna stocks are doing very well. Okay, they've been very well managed, and there's more of them every year. And some years we see those 30-inch to 40-inch fish, and we go, they grow about 8 to 10 inches a year. But we're going to see those 50 to 60-inch fish next year, and then next year it's all 80 and 90-inch fish, or vice versa. We get those 60 to 70-inch fish. We're going to, oh, these fish are going to be huge, and then this happened a couple years ago. We had a bunch of really big fish, 50 to 70 inches. We're like, all right, we're going to have like these 70 to 80-inch fish. And then we go to this past season, and it's a lot of small fish. So it really doesn't correlate what fish we're seeing. It's more or less, I think, what's getting stuck out in the canyons. And going to like the Cape or going way out east or whatever. But it's very unnecessary to target bluefins with bait. You can. Giants, obviously, a lot of those guys are bait fishing. They get very aggressive and they get very honed in and they will go anywhere. So water clarity doesn't necessarily matter. Chlorophyll doesn't really matter. It's where's the food source. You'll typically find the fish. Recreational fish, 80 pounds, 60-pound lure. When we get larger than that, we'll go to 100. We're not tying knots anymore. We're not going to start crimping. Everything kind of changes once you start crimping leaders and doing things like that. So what I'll generally talk about today is our recreational size tunas. Yellowfins, we haven't seen them in good numbers here in a couple of years just because of the way that the water eddies have come out of the canyons, inshore that is, and we're looking for that warm, clean water. 70 degrees, 72 degrees, lots of bait, squid, some micro baits, butterfish we're kind of looking for. They're very easily targeted. We get those great chunk bites. Some of them may have participated in that squid bite that we had a few years ago with the squid trawlers loaded with big yellowfin. Also very aggressive on poppers. We see a lot of these fish up on the surface, actively feeding. Not so much a jig bite, a lot of popper bites. We do get them on jigs times a day, but a lot of these fish, we do get a lot of good shots at poppers. So most of our popper fish, I would say, are going to be on yellowfin. The bluefin, it's great when it happens, but it's not always that often that we see the bluefins in good numbers on the surface. So where do we start? Again, I can run down from like Manasquan, New Jersey, all the way out to the east, all the way out east up by Cape Cod. So I can run a really large area here. And what am I looking for? Lots of structure. Typically fishing, I'll give you the feet, not fathoms, make it easy for our new people here. 150, 180 feet. Yeah, the gully, guys have gone there, 140. Okay, 140, 150, there's a lot of structure there. It drops down to 160. You'll see some deeper water over there. So again, 150 to 180, 200, even 220 feet of water is pretty much where we're looking. 30, 40 fathoms, 25 fathoms. Watching water clarity. Watching to see if there's weed lines, looking for structure. That's going to create temperature breaks where these water starting to mix, coming in from the canyon. I'll get to in a second. Chlorophyll breaks, currents, watching winds, which way is the wind blowing, where is this water moving to, and looking for the life. When you look for life, you find the bait, all that. Fish are generally going to be in that area. So like I said, I refer back to what I see down in New York before we start fishing in Rhode Island, but the red is typically what you're going to see as far as like the striped bass, the bluefish, the bunker, pogies, menhaden, whatever you want to call it, moving up the coast. Okay, if you start reading reports online, start talking to friends, maybe that fish down off of New Jersey, they're going to tell you they're starting to get spooled. They're striped bass fishing, they're trolling, and they're getting spooled because the giants are down there. Probably seen the videos on social media, the giants on the beach. There's a lot of big fish that move up the coast. You'll see the green, which is the water pushing in from the canyon. So early season, and as early as like I said, late April, May, you'll really start to see the water start pushing in. If we get a good southwest wind pushing in from the Hudson, they'll start pushing water eddies up, and you'll see them start to develop. And that's really where you're going to see those bluefin that are coming out of the canyons, the smaller recreational class bluefins. And there are some that are going to run the coast anyway, but this is where the majority of fish are going to come. Last year, year before, we had a lot of north winds. We didn't see these eddies happen. Okay, so like I said, I look at it at the beginning of May, and I'll say it like it's not going to be a very good bluefin season early down off of Jersey. It was pretty tough fishing there, and Dean, you could probably attest to that from last season, fishing down the south side of Long Island. So it was tough. We've seen the water coming out of like West Atlantis, Fishtails area with those eddies, and they're forming, and that's why we're getting those fish coming in at the dump, the Ranger, they're coming into this area, but you can see it's directly coming out of the canyon. A lot of these bluefins and yellowfins are actually coming from the east. They're not necessarily coming from like everything's on their outer banks. Those fish are hanging out all along the canyons. The commercial boats are seeing them all winter long. They are there all winter long. So a lot of these fish are moving in. The yellowfins are going to be the same way. You're going to watch these eddies start pushing inshore, seeing that warm water. So if you're at a spot, let's say you're fishing the gully, nothing really happening. Where's the water coming from? Where's it moving to? It's definitely something to start checking. The internet. So there's a lot of old school guys versus new school guys. To the new fishermen, this is new. To the old school guys, this is new stuff to them. Actually, they'll tell you some of them that this doesn't work. Okay? Now, a lot of those old captains are becoming believers in this equipment and these tactics. All right? They're used to using diamond jigs and like the old school tuna jigs. And that stuff works. And that's the other side of this, is that the new stuff works, but so does the old stuff. But a lot of old school versus new school mentality. So a lot of guys that tell you they're pros and they really have zero experience offshore, so you got to be very careful. You'll get some false information, false reports, and you'll get some real reports. The problem is, if you read a report on the internet, it's probably over 2 weeks old, and once it's there, everybody's going. Boat noise is bad, so it's typically going to shut a bite down or slow it down. But some of the good things that are good about the social media thing is to establish some good networks. You meet some really good fishermen, and some guys really do know what they're talking about. So you just got to kind of be prepared to vet some of that information that's out there. I know a lot of tackle shops do videos and things like that, and in your local tackle shops are the guys that you really want to go to and talk to, especially guys that are experienced in offshore fishing. They will give you that good advice. They will show you the rods. They'll let you bend the rods and show you what is available out there and really what's going on. So as we start searching for fish, I like to run 2 side tracker bars, especially early season, or if we're fishing something and the fish kind of moved and they're not really there, throw 2 side trackers out from Charlie Lures, 5.5 knots, normal trolling speed, and try and find some fish. Looking at my sonar, watching the water, watching the things that are going around me. It forces you to slow down. I want to run around at 30 knots more than anybody, but this forces me to slow down. And a lot of the times, this is a perfect example. We caught this fish looking for where the fish were. This was a few miles the next day from where we had a bite the day before. So again, slowing it down and starting to look, not running around leaving an area. Because sometimes, and I'll show you an example in a second, one bird makes all the difference. So you're running around, you're looking, whatever, you're trolling around, and you find whales, you find life. The biggest thing is not to run this stuff over. You can see there's a couple of boats here. Everybody's kind of staying away from them. You've seen those horrific videos where they make these big bubble feeds and they come up and when they're attacking the fish or the bait that they're eating, and they jump onto somebody's boat, they can't see. So when they make a big bubble feed and a whale's coming up, they can't see what's on the surface. So if your 18-foot boat happens to be there, it's probably going to be on the bottom. The other thing is that there's tuning in with these whales and this bait and these birds. They don't like the boat traffic. The more you run this over, the more you're going to run it down. If you pay attention to your drift, you can go up ahead of it. If you have outboards or you're comfortable shutting off your motors, shut your motors down, you drift right down on the side of it or drift through it, and you'll actually, this bite will continue, these fish, the whales, the feeds will continue to happen. these videos for whatever reason won't work. I have to come down here, but I will. So this is just a normal porpoise feed that you'll see. So you'll be running around and you'll see some porpoises off. They don't really look like they're feeding. They're not really doing. They're not actively feeding. They're just kind of running along, whatever. There's birds with them. It's a good sign that maybe there's some bait with them. The key to this is you want to get ahead of it. You want to get to the front side of these mammals, whatever they are. Okay, get to the front side of it and get some casts in and cast ahead of it. Probably 30 yards. Okay, when you cast in front of them, those tunas are typically going to be following those porpoises. They're going to be right in the front. You're only going to get a few shots at this more than likely, and then it's not going to really, you're not going to get the bites anymore. It's not going to happen again. So you move on. Typically, if you can find this, you'll find it again within a few miles of the area. So it's something just good to look for. It doesn't always have tuna in it, but it's definitely something to kind of try and get ahead of it. If you're trolling, you can try and cut them off and troll ahead of them. But once you troll through them, they're going to totally disperse, and the fish won't stay with them. This is just another whale feed. We actually, I think we're trolling in this one because we couldn't even see the lines in the screen as we're trolling by. We couldn't get the fish to bite anything. They wouldn't eat poppers, they wouldn't eat jigs, and they were moving fast. So we ended up trolling up around them with 2 bars, trying to get ahead of the mammals. Finding birds. So this is this past fall. You can see the tunas they're going to come up. They're going to start busting. I'm going to point them out. There's one right there in the under the bird. So again, we're just kind of running around, looking, checking our temperature, where our temp breaks were. You can see here in the drift in the video, I'm up ahead and I'm drifting down into the birds. So I saw the birds from far away. We came up and around, and now I'm drifting into them. All right, not trying to run these fish over and push them down. So again, very important to try and understand where your drift is going to be going. This is a single bird. So we found one bird kind of doing its thing. Looked like it was looking at a pot of fish or a pot of bait or something. We've seen the one bird kind of flying around. Unfortunately, with the screen, you can't see the bird that's flying, but he casts a popper right underneath the bird. As soon as it hits the water, thing goes tight. So again, it doesn't need to be a group. It could be one. This is a turn. I like the, you watch your tuna chicks, but seagulls are the ones that I kind of just, they'll fake you out. Those are the ones you don't really want to pay attention to. I'm not going to show this one. This feed here, probably one of the craziest bluefin feeds I've ever experienced up close next to my boat, where they were just almost jumping into it. And we happened to get it on video. So same thing, this is a couple of birds here and there, a couple of birds. Start kind of staying in the area, chasing them around. Not this whole run and gun thing. Again, kind of put it back to albacore fishing. Go back to albies. Rolling up to them, casting, whatever, getting ahead of them. You can see the drift, same way. The fish are coming to me. I'm drifting to them, I'm up ahead of them, and I've set myself up to really get tight on these fish. And then all chaos breaks loose. And nobody around us. Again, just finding a couple of birds. So your electronics. One thing that I do when we catch fish is I always mark where I'm catching fish. And what we do when we catch a fish is I will mark it. So I will put, if it's bluefin, BFT, bluefin tuna, and I'll put the date. Okay? And over the course of a few years, you're going to start to develop a logbook just on your GPS and your coordinates itself. So you could be running around and go, you know what? I had fish here last year in June. And the last week of June, I had them the year before last week of June, and I was 5 miles over here, also last week in June. It's going to start making a logbook without actually having to do any work. It's just going to do it for you. So BFT, YFT, yellowfin tunas. I'll put sharks in there. We used to shark fish. We don't shark fish much anymore. So really using your electronics to your advantage. Also understanding your electronics and what you're marking, whether it's bait, maybe the size of the fish that you're seeing. So If you start seeing these kind of marks, okay, these are bad. These fish are 100 inches, not fun unless you really want to go get them. But also understand that these guys are mixed with these guys, and these are your 60 to 70 inch tunas. So you have to understand, you start putting down baits, like a live bait or a chunk, or you start dead sticking a Ronzi, which I'll talk about in a little while. That's probably what's going to find that. The other thing, this is a jig that's coming down in through the school. All right, how good are your electronics and what are you looking at? Thermoclines, I'll talk about them in a little bit too. Thermoclines, these fish are up above the thermocline in that picture. Those fish are likely to come up to the surface. They're sitting about 60 to 75 feet of water. They see something busting on the top on a nice clear day, they will probably come up, especially in the morning hours. These fish, you can see they're in the school, they're coming up. These fish are actively coming to the surface. All right. So what are you looking at? What are you seeing? How good are your electronics? And I understand everybody has a fish finder in their boat, some kind of sonar, but what are you actually doing? These electronics here, these are two different frequencies. So that's why same pot of fish, different things going on. Medium chirp versus high wide. Okay? So that's why these are exact same pods of fish. You're looking at two different things where you can see clearly my line with the jig. And this one, you can kind of tell what's going on. You can tell the fish are breaking away, they're chasing it down, but you can't really tell what's going on. So again, understanding your electronics and how they're set up. The other thing about thermoclines is if you're marking fish below, if you've been out offshore already, you hook up to a nice fish that's big and it doesn't want to come up, and you start getting it pinwheeling down under the boat, and it hits that thermocline a lot of times, it'll hold there and you can't break it. Once you break it through that thermocline, now the thing wants to come up. It's the same thing as feeding. They're not going to want to always come to the surface. So if you start seeing the fish down here, start dropping jigs to them. What do you got here?
Those top two, the 141 to 190, on the surface, is that bait that looks through, or is that that stuff? Yeah.
Oh, no, this is probably just, this is noise because it's so hard to the surface.
Red, that's why I was wondering.
Yeah, it's just probably noise. Could be prop wash. I don't know. These are things that I find on my phone when I'm texting to people. Be like, it's really good here right now. This is what we got. As you can see, it's 5:16 in the morning, 10:40 in the morning. I mean, the times aren't even 12:14, 12:30. I mean, we're finding fish at all times of day. And I'm a big believer in the early bird gets the worm. So we always go early. We're always there early. All right, so the gear. We use Shimano on the boat. Stellas and Twin Powers mostly Twin Powers. Saragosa's are great reel, great to have out there, but we're using mostly 14,000 spinning reels. 65-pound braid. It doesn't have a whole lot of drag in the water. You can get a lot done with it. And to break 65-pound braid with your average 14K with a 300-gram jigging rod or a 150-gram popping rod, you have to work really hard and be really strong. Okay? To break 65 is hard. 8 to 10 Ks, we don't really use them too often just because of the size of the fish that we do get here. With a 14, you can pretty much beat any fish that you're going to catch in the Northeast, except for these 90-inch giants. I'd give an 80-inch giant, you give them a good run for their money, but anything that's bigger than that, we're not really targeting them. We're not targeting them, especially with this kind of gear. Not really what we're looking for. So like I said, 14, 65-pound braid, 150-gram popping rod, 300-gram jigging rod, sometimes heavier, sometimes like a 250, depending on the make or whatever brand. And then we go like with the bigger stuff, so we see like 70-inch tunas. Those 18Ks and 20Ks are really nice. 80-pound to 100-pound, depending on what we're actually spooling with, but they're going to be 80 to 100-pound and heavier rods and medium to giant class fish. The difference between having an 18 and a 20 versus a 14 is two things. Number one, to cast an 18 or a 20K setup all day is a lot on you. It's a lot in your body, and it doesn't seem like a lot, but if you hold it in your hand, hold each rod in your hand, feel how they're balanced, a 14K is a lot easier on you. And it sounds crazy for me to tell you that up here, but if you go and experience it, you will definitely notice a difference. Spinning gear is very one-dimensional, so you're not going to really troll it. It's more like a jigging and popping kind of thing only. It can be tough to be effective while you're bait fishing. So if you're going to bait fish with it and you get a bite, trying to close that nail can be very difficult. And I do not recommend it for any trolling applications because the rods are really not designed to troll. Some of our really heavy spinning gear, this is a Shimano 30K, 30,000 rods that are designed to beat fish. It's a 115-inch bluefin. Okay, this stuff can be done. We beat that fish in an hour and 15 minutes. So it's possible. You just gotta have the right gear to do it, and maybe the lack of brains to want to go do this, because this hurts. Regardless of the gear you're using, it's going to hurt. Big fish are going to hurt you, regardless, and that doesn't matter if it's a 65-inch tuna, 60-inch tuna, they're going to hurt. A lot of the guys that I see don't really put 20 pounds of drag on a lot of these fish. 20 pounds is like the go-to, and 20 pounds of drag is a lot more drag than most people really understand what it is. Take a drag scale off the top of your rod, 20 pounds, really see what it feels like. Check your drags before you go, be ready to go with 20 pounds. Conventional gear. Conventional gear is very hard for the novice angler, but it's really, really deadly for a guy that actually can use some of these rods. So, jigging specific setups with conventional, your cadence can be changed very easy. The cadences are typically a little slower, and sometimes you'll see just by the way that a jig falls off of a conventional reel, how smooth it goes, that when you go and tighten up your drag, you get the bite. Just by the way the jig is falling differently on a conventional rod to a spinning rod. They are very dynamic as far as being able to go to a chunking setup. If you want like a light, like this is a 350 gram jigging blank on this rod. It can also be trolled. It's got a winter epic here, so you can put this in a rod holder and you could troll it. It's not the best rod to be trolling, but it's possible. And we dead stick with this rod. And you can see Henry, he's in the video there, fighting a fish. It's a 7-inch tuna on this rod. And I use 2 of these rods every single day. JB Tackle is the one that actually builds these rods for me specifically. But again, very, very dynamic you can be with these things. Transitioning, you can do a whole bunch of stuff with a little bit of rod. This is a rod here specifically that I was talking about. 6-foot rod, good jigging blank, nice soft tip, tons of power, and we have beat fish on this over 80 inches. So it's got Talica 16 on it, and a whole bunch of, it's got 400 and something yards of line on it. And it's the multicolor, it's got multicolor braid, so every 30 feet is one color. So if I see a fish 150 feet, I just tell the client, drop down 105 colors, we're at 150, and that's a lot of times how we're targeting those fish. How we kind of set up when we go offshore. I like to run if we're going to troll, if we're going to go out and troll, I'm going to have at least 5 or 7 trolling setups. But then on top of that, I use these as my Ron Z rod, and I like to jig with these, so I like to jig conventional. So I will jig with these, and then if we go bait fishing, I'll have these on the boat at all times. So I always have 2 of these rods. But it's good to have a good jigging setup with you. Some kind of like Ron Z rod, which is what I call this. But if you wanted to go spinning, you could go with like a 7-foot spinning. It's really nice for fighting a fish because the fulcrum point, meaning the bend in that rod, comes closer to you. And when the rod is bent closer to you, it's easier on the angler. So a shorter rod is better for you as an angler. But the 7-foot, 6 to 8-foot popping rods will allow you to cast further. So it's kind of one of those give and takes. It's the same as like, well, I'm going to jig with this. Well, this isn't as comfortable as your traditional jigging rod, yet this is something that I can use on a smaller boat to get like an extra rod or 2 on my boat that do multiple things. So The reason why I say I have 3 setups per person, you can also jig if you had to, and if you had to, with a 7-foot rod. It's not comfortable, but you can do it. But you want to transition fast. You're jigging on a bite, and then all of a sudden the fish come up in front of you. You're not going to switch to a popper or whatever. You want to be able to grab that next rod and cast. So if you're jigging and popping, you kind of want to have that mentality like, this is what we're going to go do. And, that 2 trolling rod, if the room's a problem, you bring 2 30s or 2 50s to try and find some fish, and then you kind of sit up your arsenal in your boat, jig and pop specific. Leaders is probably the most important part of your whole jig and pop itinerary, if you want to call it that, for your leader. You want to make sure you have really good leader, clean leader. My leaders on all of my jigging rods are about 20 feet. I usually start with like 25 feet. You're going to cut these down. Okay? I understand fluorocarbon is expensive, but when you change your jig, you're probably going to be cutting off and shortening it up anyway. The other thing I tell people is that when you get a fish that comes on the boat, okay, and your line is sitting on the ground, and there's a fish, it's attached to the fish tail. Get the fish in the boat and get that hook out of its mouth. Okay? Don't let the fish wrap up in your leader. Don't let your other crew step on your leader, because this leader getting nicked and getting twisted up in a rod, getting a bridge or on a fish, getting abrasion on it is going to make that start now to become very visible in the water. And the more fluorocarbon gets, it's not always more resistant than fluorocarbon. So if you start licking fluorocarbon, touching fluorocarbon, it gets very dirty very fast, and the fish will see it. So jigging, I like to use a 60 to 80 pound leader. I like it, like I said, at least 12 feet. But I like to be 15, 20, 25 feet. 12 feet, once I hit that, I'm pretty much cutting it off and restarting. There's not a ton of stress on the knots. So meaning that, I'm going to get back to that. I'll get back to the knots. On popping, we use mostly 80 pounds. A lot of surface noise. So you don't really need to use 60-pound leader on the popping setups. And that means poppers, stick baits in general. Casting setups. 60-pound, you'll really want to go to 60 when you're using a very small lure and you feel that the lure is being affected by your leader. That's the time that I'll start jumping down to a smaller leader. You can see here, I don't go down to 50 and 40 and 30. Some of these numbers I hear out there are crazy. We like to put a lot of pressure on the fish, get the fish to the boat, release them. Again, you only get a few of these things at best. The rest of them, when you release them, you want them to survive. Tuna have a very high survival rate if you take care of them and release them quick. So feed them fast, get them in the boat, release them. Popping rods are generally going to require a retie. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about here. So pretend this is a popping rod, and I'm getting ready to cast this. I would want my knot to be right here outside of the top guide. Okay? I don't want to cast this thing and send that knot, my leader connection, through my guides. All right? That's with the velocity and of the lure and the amount of weight, depending on what I'm throwing, will beat that knot up really fast. All right? And again, cause failure. On a jigging setup, making sure I have my clicker on here. On a jigging setup, you can see I have a longer leader. All right? I have a bunch of tag ends on here because I was showing somebody how to tie an FG knot. But this knot going through my guides on a jigging setup, this knot's not going to get beat up. All right, there's no velocity, just free falling it out. So that knot can go in and out of my guides. That's why I keep that longer leader on a jigging setup. And on a popping rod, that's sure it's not gonna hinder the distance that I'm casting. It's not gonna break my knot down. Okay, everything's moving fast. It's not moving as slow as a jig. Everything's moving fast. The fish aren't going to see it as much. So you get away with that 5, 6, 7 foot leader generally on a popping rod. And again, there's kind of mixed reviews on that, but I'd rather have a slightly shorter leader and know that my knot is going to be secure and have a very good connection. The thing is, especially if you have novice anglers on your boat, always keep watching as the captain how that knot is looking, how that connection is looking. Because as they cast it and cast it and cast it, sometimes they're casting 150, 200 times a day, that knot will break down. Once you see that tag end start to pop on an FG, it's all over from there. So FG, I just talked about it. So back in the day, when I first started doing this, we used to use Slim Beauty knot. Okay, a little bit bulky. We do not use a unit to unit at all offshore. We were using the Slim Beauty, but now the development of the FG knot, which came from overseas, probably about 10 years ago or so, we started tying the FG. There's a bunch of different ways you can tie this. There's a bunch of ways you can finish this knot, I should say. They all work. I do it very simple. I only use half inches. I can show somebody how to tie this knot if you want. The other knot that I use is a PR knot. PR knot requires a bobbin and a little bit more finesse and definitely some more practice. The FG, the biggest thing with it is you want tension. If you don't have a set of knot pullers and you try and pull this thing with your hands, two things are going to happen. You're going to cut your hands and your knot's going to not get tight enough. When you pull this knot tight, and this picture doesn't really show it, but the fluoro, there's actually heat that occurs when you pull this knot tight, and the braid will actually change color. You want to see that color change in the braid and know that it's cinching down. All right. Also, cinching your knots, test your fluoro. You will find at some point, probably in an offshore fishing career, that you get either you leave some fluoro in your boat, or you buy a skein of fluorocarbon, that's defective. It's bad. You pull it, it snaps. It's happened to me a handful of times. Something to look out for. If you start testing your knots, you may find a problem. It may be your knot. It could also be your braid. I've had bad braid before too. It happens. So again, you check your knots, you check your braid, you check your fluorocarbon. All one shot. And the one thing I say when I tie this knot and the way I tie it, can you tie this knot at 30 knots? So typically what happens is you're on a jig bite, or popper bite, or whatever, fish comes in, either you hook up and you get the fish, and you're cutting, you're going to retie your knot, or you break off, and now you guys are going to run back up on the drift. Can you tie this thing at 30 knots in the time that it takes when you get from there to the front of the drift and get ready to go? So, can you tie it at 30 knots? You're not tying a PR bobbin knot at 30 knots. No way in hell. Some of the stuff that's out there, and there's a ton of stuff out there as far as the jig and pop craze is going, and lures and things like that. And you can go from stuff like jigs and stick baits and poppers from Shimano, the Ron Z's, strategic anglers, where it's custom, and Merv's here at Goose Hummock. You could meet Merv if you wanted to. See some of the lures that he makes. Again, there's tons of stuff out there that you could use. It all works. It all has a place. All right. When you go to jigging, if you're going to tie, I'm like a streaker jig. So a streaker jig is like this. Your UVTs, anything that's thin, long and thin, streaker jig. You're going to want to direct tie. If you're going to direct tie to your welded ring, your solid ring. Not your split ring. Pressure on this split ring, well, there's two things. Number one, a lot of these companies, that split ring is garbage. Okay? It's not designed to hold a tuna. So if you put a swivel on that, 9 times out of 10, it'll break at some point with the right fish on it. It'll open up. All right? That's something you want to consider changing. Okay? If you're going to direct tie to that solid ring. All right. If you direct tie to that split ring, two things would happen. You could open it up completely, or just the pressure to get your line up underneath that, work its way off. Also, some sharp edges here on the edge of the split ring is not good on fluorocarbon. What I use, rigging swivels. Okay. We use these all the time. Use them every day. If you use a rigging swivel, your assist cord goes on one side. It's hard to see in this picture, but there's a solid ring that comes on the swivel, okay? And then a split ring. The split ring goes in a jig. The solid ring just goes in a solid assist cord. assist hook. You can get like a BKK Reef Master. It comes with assist hook. You set it once, and you're done. Now you can change to any jig that you want. Any color, any weight, whatever. Never changing the hook, never cutting a line. One shot, there you go. The swivel is saving your blade. So a lot of guys don't know, but if you start using like a slow pitch style jig, as these jigs start getting wider, they're going to flutter a lot more and spin a lot more. It's just twisting your blade. If you twist blade, it gets weak. Weak is your line. So you think you have 65 and you're fishing with 40. Okay? So the more that you can do with some of these tricks of using like this swivel, or simply changing your split ring and putting a good swivel on there, you can save your brain. So you got to be careful. These streaker jigs typically don't twist your line too bad. What do you got? Huh? I got it. Hold on. What do you got, Hunter?
I was gonna say, wouldn't putting the swivel on there make it more equipment, like take up more space? I guess you would say.
How old are you?
Sorry,
How old are you?
15.
15. Typical 15-year-old. You let me finish. Give me back the microphone. Hunter's not allowed to have the microphone anymore. So, Hunter, thank you. This will affect, it can affect you on some days. All right, I will tell you that most days that ribbon swivel will not affect you. Okay, but again, as I said in the beginning, sometimes you're fishing these albies that don't want to eat. You may have to remove that. And at that point, I do not recommend using any kind of slow pitch style jig. All right, stick to the streaker and stick to tying directly to your solid ring. Got it? Got it. All right. Jigging is hard. A lot of guys want to come jigging all day. It's definitely not easy. Poppers. There's a lot of different poppers out there. All the poppers will be rigged, heavy duty split ring in the front, followed by a ball bearing swivel in the back, and then attached to whatever leader we're going to use. If you start getting the small stuff like this, sometimes this is not going to work. You might have to use like a loop knot. The problem with a loop knot, direct tying this can be difficult because it will sacrifice some of the action. So if you go to like a loop knot, the blade strength is not that high. So you have to understand the class of fish you're using, the size leader that you're using, kind of what you're doing before you start using loop knots and things like that on some of this gear. Also, the crotches and things like that will start to break. You got to be very careful. But again, given the scenario, it's something that you want to go to a small stick bait like this, which it's only about that long. It's pretty heavy, so you can actually cast this thing and it works very well. Again, it's just something where you have to kind of sacrifice, and depending on the class of fish. And the other thing that happens with this, using a small bait, when a fish eats it, it usually eats the whole thing, and so now you have to worry about what leader size is on there. So just some of the things when you're buying some of this tackle. This is a bubble popper. SLC has one, Merv has them here over at the Goose booth. RWA has one, a bubble popper that's here at the JV booth. They are around. It's kind of a new thing that you're starting to see. It's starting to pop up a lot on social media. Shimano has the bomb dip popper. It's also like a very similar type thing where they pop and then they make a huge bubble trail and you kind of work them like a stick bait and you can kind of do a lot of different things with them. So when you get a finicky fish, those sometimes you can't get the bite of a regular popper. They won't eat a stick bait, but they're kind of committing to a popper. They're coming up and they're rolling. Sometimes this is the way you have to go. And again, you're getting to the specifics of what's available out there. These are expensive because a lot of these are custom, but what I tell people is use your out of the box stuff, production stuff for whatever, and then have this stuff on hand for when these bites get difficult. The advantage to having a custom-made plug is the guys that build it, test them, will tell you based on how you rig it with either treble hooks, single hooks, different size hooks, they will swim differently. And again, become very effective in a bite where it's a finicky tuna. This was out at West Atlantis this past summer. We got called into a bite or a feed, and then this was like a couple miles away from it. That's all big eyes. So, do you want to be out there trolling and see this going on? So, these fish were very big. We broke every one of them off that we hooked. And it wasn't because of any real failure. It was actually because there's so many fish there. When we cast it into them, they'd hit the other fish and break our lines off. And they didn't stay up long enough. So by the time we got all reset up and retied, we fought one fish for like 40 minutes. Once we got retied, we couldn't get back on them. They were already pushed down. One of the coolest feeds I've seen in the Northeast, especially in the canyons. Again, just some other stuff that we have out there that's available. Epoxy jigs. There's some heavy-duty rigged epoxy jigs, poppers, stick baits, again, poppers. You can see that common here, yellow fins with the poppers, blue fins, that's yellow fin down in Louisiana. The Ron Z, probably the most effective lure in the industry, by far. You can cast it, you can jig it, you can troll it, you can dead stick it. Okay, this is the rod I use specifically for dead sticking. And like I said, I mount the fish at 150 feet. I tell the client, put it out 5 colors, we're down 150. This is sitting in a rod holder, unmanned. The boat is jigging it itself. It's kind of just doing its thing. We get a bite. Now I'm setting the drag, kind of like we're chunking. I want enough drag to set a hook, but I want that fish to be able to run. If you're not using a conventional reel and a fish bites it and the drag's not set loose, it's going to load up, make a huge gap, opening in the fish. The fish is going to turn back at the boat, come back at the boat just naturally because there's no place else to go, and likely pop off. So we like conventional. And with that conventional, when that fish hits it, I can leave it in the rod holder, slam that drag home, crank down on it, and now we're in the fight. So that's why I use this rod. I don't have to worry about snapping my blank because of the butt on that rod. Again, just some of we catch a lot of like upper 60-inch, 60, 70-inch, 60, 65, 70-inch fish on the dead stick rods. Pink is obviously a very popular color. We use pink a lot. We use white a lot. And just overall, jig and pop stuff, don't be reluctant to change. Try new things. Think about what's going on. Why is it not working? Are you using a bait with a huge treble hook, and maybe the hook just needs to be made smaller? Is it not swimming right? Is the lure too big? Is it too small? What are these fish feeding on? A lot of people don't understand that. If you're on a lot of micro baits, like you see a lot of like little butterfish or whatever, those little rain baits, clear poppers, clear stick baits, mimic full big mimic schools of small fish, and that's why they get those bites on clear. Clear is a good color to have, and I say color, but it's a good lure to have. The action, how they're falling when you're using a stick bait or a popper. Most of the time, if you're popping for tuna, it's nice and slow, very deliberate. The tuna hit on your paws, so you pop, and on that pause, the tuna comes up and hits it. The same thing goes for a stick bait. Stick bait, they're going to get hit on the paws. When you're jigging with your cadence, it's usually when you stop, the fish hits it. It's not hitting it while it's moving. It's usually going to lift back up, and the tuna is there. All right, they're hitting on the paws. So on the stick bait side, how is your stick bait falling when you stop? Is it falling straight down? Is it twitching back and forth in the fall? Again, go check out Murray. He's got a frantic over there that he builds, a frantic stick bait. That thing twitches when it falls. It looks awesome. We get a lot of fish on that lure just for that reason. End game stuff. The guys are new getting in the jig and pop and just tuna fishing in general. A lot of big fish out there. LT Marine makes this release hook right here. You can see we got like a 105-inch fish that's next to us. We're getting to release them. You can very easily swim the fish. You want to be in the corner of the mouth with anything you're going to release. Guys always want to lift off them. They want to get up underneath the chin. There's a lot of vitals there. You'll bleed the fish out when you go to release them. Get them in the corner of the mouth. drag them. I mean, this fish we drag, most of these giants, we end up with those, we'll drag them for 20 minutes, half hour, 40 minutes sometimes. Get that tail beat going, you'll see their color come back, and then you pull. I'm holding the one side with the pressure, and then the guy behind me is actually holding he's holding this end. So as soon as that fish comes back to life, he pulls it, the fish swims off. Very simple. This is a tuna tomahawk, again from LT Marine. But killing that fish, getting on the boat, killing that fish, it sounds cool, it looks cool, the fish hitting the deck, making all that noise. But at the end of the day, you're truly just bruising your meat. You're making your meat quality worse. So we get all our fish in the deck, we kill them, we shut them down with that, we bleed them out, we core all of our fish, meaning we take the heads off, we gut them, we pack them with ice, we get them away. 1 pound of fish requires 1 pound of ice. So lots of ice. If you're talking 40-pound tuna, that's 120. Oh, sorry. We get 3. I'm sorry. So I'm thinking the wrong way. It's 80 pounds of fish, plus you get an over, which could be 150 pounds. All right, so you have 200 pounds of fish. Most guys are not bringing 200 pounds of ice. So it's something to think about. And then it's like, oh, I can't store it. I can't do this. I can't do that. Canyon bags are great. You can move them around. Any fish bag for that matter. Coolers. We deal with cooler. I bring a 200-quart cooler with me every day. It's a royal pain in the ass, and I get it. But I keep ice in there. I got a little system of how I do it. A bunch of ice in my fish box. And we move fish and ice back and forth kind of all day long. And you can also use them to store some bait. Anybody got any questions? I threw a lot out there. Any questions? Here's my contact info. Like I said, we start bluefin tuna fishing right in the middle of May, and we'll start looking, and then we'll kind of while we're squid fishing, and we'll go right through January. So I appreciate your time. I know end of the day, and good luck out there. See you guys.